while in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
It's crazy. And meanwhile,
good point. Good point. Now let's let. I mean, Title IX is not something that I'm super familiar with in terms of my background and my understanding of history. It's something that I need to spend a little bit more time on. I actually this morning was looking at talking to someone from the International Women's Forum to come in here and to essentially just describe Title IX a little bit more, why it passed, what it really means for our society today, especially in context of this debate about transgender biological males and females. But let's hear what Piers Morgan has to say first.
Genuinely want to compete at athletics and swimming or whatever it may be, they're the ones who are suffering here. They need to be found a way to compete fairly and justly.
Well, what's your answer then?
I think there's one or two answers. I think they either compete against their biological sex, as many of them did before, or you create an entirely new category for transgender athletes. And then that's
probably what's going to happen.
But what you cannot do is continue to allow more and more trans athletes.
I completely agree. Now let's watch this exact same clip here, but I want you to see it with this protest going on right next to it. These are these leftist activists chasing Riley Gaines down a hallway. Watch this.
Nobody, including Riley Gaines, who I disagree with strongly, should be.
What do you disagree with, out of interest?
I think that it should be up to sporting bodies to make the decisions about who and how.
What has she said that's actually wrong?
I think that what she has done is try to turn this. We talked about people, using things to get likes and get clicks.
That's not what she's doing.
It's not?
I've got no truck for Riley Gaines personally, but all I've seen her do is stand up for women's rights to fairness and equality.
Well,
she actually competed against Leah Thomas, and it was obviously unfair. Leah Thomas won one of the races in the NCAA championships by 50 seconds against a bunch of biological females who simply couldn't keep up. That cannot be right. It cannot be fair.
That is something that I think our sporting bodies should be dealing with. And by the way, Riley is speaking up for herself, and that is her prerogative, and I respect her free speech.
I think she's speaking up for pretty much every female athlete in the world.
I agree.
I mean, wasn't that the point?
I agree. Look at this. I mean, can you imagine what would you do if you were faced with this situation? We're talking about Riley Gaines here. We're not talking about a kickboxer. We're not talking about a fully grown armed man. We're talking about a girl being chased down a hallway by these activists like this, many of whom are men.
Title IX in the early 70s was something that was it was a major event in feminism, that we finally have this law that says at colleges, right, and I think high schools too, but definitely colleges, women's sports have to be given equal to men's sports, so that women aren't and this led to the WNBA and lots of other stuff. This seems to
see, that's how you know that they are the bad guys. Really good insights by Bill Maher and Piers Morgan. Never thought I would say that, but this kind of stuff went on, and I thought they made a really good point too when they're talking about Generation Z. Take a listen to this.
Okay, to do something for the likes, that disease that happened to America, that every kid has to do something for the likes. I just think our kids are not mature.
Well, I think they're constantly seeking affirmation. This is because of things like Instagram.
It's
like you post something and people validate you.
But do you use national security secrets for that?
Well, because
the level of bad judgment.
Right, but the real scandal is not that he wants to do it.
You guys sound kind of old.
What?
And grumpy right now. I mean, let's be clear.
Sorry?
Yeah, it's such a bullshit.
Kids are immature. That's why they're kids.
Not at 21. Not all over the world.
21-year-olds are immature. That's why we don't let them drink until they're 21. That's why some of us don't think that 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds ought to be able to go get AR-15s.
They can go fight.
I think there are arguments.
They can be in the Army.
Well, I think that's a discussion we should have, because I think the more we know about
I thought if you vote, you should be able to...
Dude, Bill Maher is just absolutely torching this chick. It's so good. It's so good.
At a certain level of maturity, they're deciding whether you should be in Congress or not.
Well, and by the way, I win those votes.
What?
And I win those votes, and I'm proud of it. But what I'm saying is
you just said you win the votes of the immature.
Well, but the immature... First off, immaturity is not necessarily an age thing. You can be immature
But you just played the age card.
Yeah.
You were like, our argument sucks because we're old, which is
No, I didn't say that. I said
getting so boring.
And by the way, I'm only 58, just for the record.
That's...
What? I mean, but shouldn't
Not young.
Shouldn't we critique each other on the content of our ideas, not on those identity politics things?
Yes,
like,
but
you're old, you couldn't possibly have the right idea.
But Bill, your whole complaint is that they're young.
I mean, if I said that about women or something, that wouldn't be right.
But your whole complaint is that this person was young.
Yeah, but isn't the point?
Well, my complaint
really
is that our young are immature.
Right.
That compared to other countries and other times in history, we raise very immature people because we coddle them. We give them a sense
Hard to disagree, although in the context of this, he's talking about that whistleblower in the military who released the Ukraine papers about some of our NATO strategy there against Russia. If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining in. Hopefully the internet will be compliant with us today. Very sorry for some of the issues that we had a little bit earlier on the program. I'm hoping that things will settle down and hopefully we'll get fast enough internet for you to be able to have a good show. Michael Nip just subscribed to my Twitch channel. Michael, appreciate you, brother. Thank you for that. Sometimes YouTube is more finicky than the other social networks when it comes to a connection that's a little bit slow. So once, if YouTube goes down and you're just kind of like sick of dealing with it, just remember Rumble pretty much is very good about maintaining the stream, as well as Twitch is very good at maintaining the stream. So those are good backups. My usernames over there are AP for Liberty. Joining us right now is Todd in Minnesota, who's over there on Twitch, as well as Kiwi Turtles. Glad to have you here this morning, and thank you very much for joining us. If it's your first time joining us here, Kiwi, first time I've seen you on the stream here today, so welcome. Give you a big shout out. We're going to have John Cardillo joining us here at 7:30 this morning. We're looking forward to talking to him about why he has become the Trump campaign, or at least their lowest paid consultants, enemy number one. It's for some reason, the Trump campaign attacks this one Florida conservative more, it seems, than Democrats, more than his opponents in the Republican Party who are competing for the nomination of the Republican Party. This one former NYPD conservative who at one time I think was a really big Trump supporter has apparently become the biggest enemy to the Trump people and the Trump campaign. So we're going to talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Stick around. I'll be right back.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Peterson stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit apforlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. How are you feeling today on a Monday? Good, good. Nice to hear such positive response. If you're watching us over on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Facebook, make sure you click like to help us spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty. I see our buddy Robbie Thurman over in the chat is shaking the magic 8-ball, saying, will the internet be reliable today? The Magic 8-Ball responded, I don't think so. Yikes. Oh, it looks like it's working well now, so we'll just try and go with it. All right. Well, the Trump campaign has a lot of paid consultants, and they send them out to attack people who go against anything that their God Emperor says. But it appears the Trump campaign, when they go out to attack my next guest, is not sending their best. They're low paid, they're terrible people, and some, I assume, are good people, but we'll let John Cardillo be the judge of that. He's former NYPD, he's a conservative talk show host and activist, and he's joining us from the sunny state of Florida this morning right now. Good morning. For joining us on the program today. Appreciate you.
Hey, Austin, how are you? Not too sunny today. It's more rain in Fort Lauderdale, man, after like 4 feet of water in the street the other day, but
Oh, well, we're glad to have you here this morning, though, John. Thanks for coming on to talk to our audience today a little bit about this. Now, I brought John here today because I have seen the Trump campaign waging war, not against the Democrats, not so much against Joe Biden. They're fighting an internal war. And maybe this is just, what happens in a Republican primary. But there seems to be a special hatred, a special enmity or ire or whatever you call it, for people like you. You have seemed to become the enemy number one for the big sort of 1.8 million Twitter follower Trump accounts that are out there, what you were calling the lowest paid consultants. Why do they hate you so much, John?
Yeah, discount consultants, I call it. I have no idea. Well, one of my business partners called me yesterday. He's like, what the F? It's like, do all these people do at Mar-a-Lago is obsess over you? He's like, you're in their heads. I'm not running for office. All I did was I said, hey, I live in Florida. I like Ron DeSantis. I'm paraphrasing or whatever. I was a little forceful in my support of DeSantis. And the vitriolic attacks didn't stop. Once they started, they didn't stop. And they send like these 25-year-old kids who've never had any life experience outside of creating memes on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And they try to engage in these policy debates with you. They're wrong on everything because they have no historical reference points, no empirical reference points. So then when you refute their idiot, because they're really just dumb and boring people with no life experience, when you refute it with something that's irrefutable, then they make these dumb memes about you. So here are the narratives about me. I'm a serial philandering alcoholic who defrauded the Ukrainian government out of body armor, which is all BS. So we got this lawsuit they keep pushing out. We're in a civil lawsuit with a U.S. buyer over logistics. The trash daily beast and Trump's discount consultants turned it into, we defrauded Ukraine. So they come out with these preposterous personal attacks. But to your point, first of all, I've been doing this a long time. I'm thick-skinned. When I was a rookie cop in the Bronx, they were throwing like washing machines off rooftops at us, right? So a meme on Twitter, I couldn't care less about. But I'm not the guy running for office. So they're out there attacking me, but what they're not doing, they're not putting any positive messaging out for their candidate. And quite frankly, even when they do engage in policy attacks against other candidates, be it DeSantis, who's not even declared yet, or anybody else, they fall flat because they're not attacks based in substance and history, what works, what doesn't work. They're just spitballing because
about Ron DeSantis and the possibilities of him campaigning, because I mean he doesn't have a campaign just yet. He's running as if he seems to be behaving. He's doing everything as if he is a presidential candidate. But I mean, is there a chance he doesn't run? Because honestly, John, from what I can see, I mean, the amount of support that Trump has, I mean, we're looking like we're setting ourselves up for another 2016, where you have all these other sort of principled conservatives, and they all just kind of eat into each other's support. I mean, do you think DeSantis really has a chance? Because I don't know. It makes a lot of sense what Bill Maher said when he said, "Why would you want to go listen to the tribute band when the main band's already playing?" Trump and DeSantis kind of fish in the same ponds. Am I wrong?
No, look, I don't know. That's the best way I'll say it. So in terms of him running, I mean, it seems like the guy's going to run. I know his team very well. They give up nothing. When I tell you, it is, if somebody were worthy of higher office based on how tight of a ship they run, Ron DeSantis would be far and away in the lead. There are no leaks out of his shop. There are no unforced errors. There are no comms discipline mistakes. So really nothing is leaking to give an indication one way or the other. I mean, look, it seems like the guy wants to run for president, right? He's visiting all the right states and he's resonating in those states. I'm in the camp, and I think you and I have known each other long enough, and we've done enough on air and know each other's brands where, I don't BS, right? So I'm not a guy that blows smoke because I like a candidate. I'm not in the camp that Trump has this locked up for a couple of reasons. One is a big intangible. And I said this on another show last week that nobody's talking about, Austin. There were times in law enforcement where I felt bad for nonviolent, white collar, call them what you will, defendants because of how grueling, how brutal, how devastating a criminal proceeding is to somebody. People are nervous when they get pulled over for speeding. And when they have to go to traffic court, they're even more nervous. Now magnify that through the lens of a felony indictment. Now, I think the indictment in New York is complete nonsense. Just a quick point here. I worked in a robbery unit. Right? They're charging him with 34 counts on one payment because he made 34 payments to achieve the sum total. That would be like me arresting a guy for robbing a liquor store for $100 and charging him with 10 counts of robbery because the clerk counted out $10 bills. So what the New York City DA is doing is disgraceful. It's prosecutorial misconduct, in my opinion. But it's grueling. If Georgia and the feds also come down with indictments, there's no way a 76-year-old man, I don't care who you are, Donald Trump down to, John Q. Public that no one knows, there is no way you keep up the energy that he had in 2016. It's just physically, emotionally, mentally impossible to do while facing 3 criminal proceedings, being on your phone with your lawyers, talking about this, your lawyers being honest because they have to be and say, hey, look, you may not see any jail time, but worst case, you'll see this. I don't think Trump will see any jail time. My point is, it's psychologically devastating to a person. It's also a turnoff for independent and non-party affiliated voters. And I think those polls are going to start to show more of a disparity, which will trickle down into the primary polls. So I'm not so sure that Trump has this. And quite frankly, my last point is, it sure seems, as I dig through the crosstabs, the samples, the questions, that a lot of these polls showing Trump up by these statistically improbable numbers, 20%, 30%, et cetera, they sure seem like push polls. And what push polls are, for your audience members that don't know, that aren't in politics, it's when an entity, could be a campaign, a political action committee, a PAC, whatever, when they pay for a poll and the questions are scripted in a way to predetermine the outcome. And the reason they do that, the campaigns have always done that, is when you start winning by these highly improbable numbers in these push polls, the wisdom is donors will come. And so I'm of the mindset that really we don't know anything yet. It's way too early. I'm not putting stock in any of these polls. Hillary Clinton thought she had 92% to Donald Trump's 8%, right? At this time back in 2015, 2016 cycle. So right now, I think it's far too early to tell. There are just too many variables, too many intangibles.
If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to John Cardillo. He's a conservative activist and talk show host out of the sunny state of Florida. Here's my concern when it comes to Donald Trump. Let's say that he does win the nomination and has to put together a team. He's already kind of run through the first, second, third string of all of the top tier talent on the right. I mean, Rudy Giuliani and Anthony Scaramucci and all of these people, that you could call them second or third, or fourth string, whatever, call them what you will. But I mean, otherwise, he's pretty much burned bridges or cut off any of the other top talent in the Republican Party that he could make use of. I mean, I don't think hiring John Bolton is going to be in the cards. I don't think Bolton would do it, right? I mean, so how does Donald Trump even begin to build a team? Who is out there that could work for him with any kind of credibility other than these, 25-year-old meme makers that you're talking about right now? How does he build a team that could even have a chance of winning a general election?
Well, that's just it, right? He's taken all the people who have fallen off, who have become really like weirdo fringe, like Roger Stone, a guy I used to be very friendly with, actually, who just went off the deep end, began attacking me. I mean, he's got guys like 25-year-old little Alex Bruzewitz. He doesn't have anybody that wants to go work for him. Look, you've got on the foreign policy side, he does, because he was very good. Foreign policy, Trump was great. So on the foreign policy side, he still has very credible people that are willing to work with him. But foreign policy is one element of an administration. So when it comes to the domestic side of this, staffing the White House with, say, a strong chief of staff and a deputy chief of staff of operations, right? They're really the linchpin of the White House. Staffing up an attorney general. I don't know who in the world would be this guy's attorney general at this point with the messes created at DOJ and FBI. But personnel's always been Trump's Achilles heel. And I just distill it down to two things, which is why I'm completely off Trump. I mean, look, he's the nominee in the general. I'll vote for him. I'm never going to vote for a Dem. But he had people like his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, whip votes in Dana Point, California at the RNC convention to keep Ronna McDaniel, the biggest loser to ever helm the RNC, in power. And on a recent interview, he said he's still not sure if Chris Wray was a bad decision at the FBI. The man's personnel acumen is the worst that has ever been in the Oval Office, in my opinion.
What I find fascinating, this is just a brief aside, is your comments about foreign policy, is just how much the Republican Party has shifted on that topic from the Bush years until the Trump years. If you consider that when I was campaigning as a young activist for Congressman Ron Paul, the biggest beef that most Republicans had with Ron Paul was that they called him an isolationist. They thought that his foreign policy was suicidal and that would get us into trouble. But if anything, Donald Trump really, I think, probably put into action the closest to a more non-interventionist foreign policy that we'd have, a peace through strength approach, if you will. Although I wouldn't call it Reaganism, it really did sort of have the trappings of that, where he really took a strong stance against those countries that that are obviously hostile to us, but he also didn't get us into any other new wars, which is sort of unique for presidents in the modern age. Although I'd like to segue to another topic, if while we have you here this morning, John, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you about the Bud Light brouhaha. I've tried to avoid talking about this because it just seems to me like such a cash grab on both sides. Because all day long, all I see are my conservative followers posting a transgender dude over and over again. I mean, I think that part of the big reason why that Dylan Mulvaney guy is so rich is because conservatives cannot stop talking about him.
Yeah,
Where do you
yeah.
come down on this on the culture war? I mean, on one side, I think I agree with like the Matt Walshes, even though I'm not a social con, that we've kind of got a scalp here, right? We've sort of made an example out of Bud Light. And then my paranoid libertarian side sees, oh, well, the CEO was a spook. He was former CIA. So I'm kind of glad that, we're sort of sticking it to the deep state in the other sense. And then the third part of me is just completely disgusted by the fact that conservatives seem so obsessed with this transgender guy they can't stop talking about him. Where do you come down on this issue?
I don't know. It's a beer can, but look, I think that these brands, I think it's an economic issue, right? These brands have to stop listening to woke creative execs who don't have their best interest at heart. I mean, this brand manager that they brought in, she's out of her mind and completely out of touch with her customer base. So the proof of that's not Cardillo's opinion or Peterson's opinion. I mean, look at the market capitalization. They're down 4 billion, soon to be 5 billion over this. I have a friend, affluent guy down here, older guy in Florida. He owns a country club, a very large one up in the Palm Beach County area. And he told them he doesn't want any more Budweiser or Bud Light products at his club. Well, they turned around and the distributor said, well, this might hurt your other Anheuser-Busch brands, like a sort of a veiled threat. And he told them, good, pull the whole line out of my club. That's the trend. So his colleagues in that business, in the hospitality business, the club business, they're doing the same. So it is hurting, especially where these bars, restaurants, country clubs, etc., are in more red areas. It's definitely hurting the bottom line. Now, there's a nuanced thing happening, right? So you've got people out there saying, don't blame Anheuser-Busch, blah, blah, blah. And I think there's a bit of confusion. So they're saying certain conservatives, certain people in the Trump family are going soft on this. But what they're saying is, hey, Anheuser-Busch has always been one of the larger Republican donors of any large corporation. That's true. However, the company is now owned by InBev, a European company, and they're clearly not going to be large Republican donors. And so this decision for the Mulvaney campaign was made while Bud Light was under the ownership of InBev. What I'm told, though, from people inside the company is the C-suite wasn't very happy because that brand manager, that brand VP, did this pretty much on her own without the authority of people higher up. And maybe ideologically they would have agreed with her. But their position is they also would have known that it was going to be death for the market capitalization and probably would have pulled back from this because the brand has gotten a lot of attention, none of it good. And that stock arrow is definitely trending in the wrong direction. So I think from an economic perspective, it was a really stupid move for the company. I think from a social perspective, the Walshes and all are right. I mean, it's a good scalp, right? We've got to stop legitimizing this whole trans movement. Look, if you're an adult and you're trans, I couldn't care less. But I do care when it feels like 90% of public policy is being driven by a fringe part of the population that may be less than 1%. That's just bad policy.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me as a pandering to a very, very tiny minority in order to try and I mean, and what's this constituency? I mean, who's voting based on these issues? I don't know. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, you're listening to Austin Peterson. I'm your host, and I'm joined now by John Cardillo from the state of Florida. We were talking a little bit earlier about the Trump versus DeSantis crews going at it, and now we're talking a little bit about the brouhaha over Bud Light and Yingling. What kind of beer do you drink, John?
Now, I typically drink vodka. I try to get away from beer, but when I
You're a
do,
Russian spy. I see. So that's what it says about you.
Collusion.
We're sort of at a weird place in the Republican Party these days, John, where that has been one of the weirder phenomenons to see so many Republicans kind of flipping and I see a lot of Republicans openly coming out in praise of Russia's intervention into Ukraine. Has that been one of the weirder things for you to see the Republican Party flip on Russia?
I don't know if I could curse if we're going to a live air. It's so moronic, man. It's so stupid. It's like these people have become like binary robots where nothing is nuanced. And you can say, okay, maybe there wasn't Russia collusion, but both Zelensky, I look at the Ukraine conflict differently than most. I call it the Bloods and the Crips. Putin's a gangster, Zelensky's a gangster, and they're two gangsters going for theirs. Zelensky's ripping us off while Putin's trying to take back some land he thinks belongs to the Rodina, to the motherland, because he's an old Soviet at the end of the day. They're just two gangsters, fighting it out. One is getting far richer. I mean, Putin's already worth billions, tens. People speculate he could be worth as much as 200 billion squirreled away around the world. But Zelensky's had a pretty good couple of years now, hasn't he, at our expense?
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, who knows if he even survives to enjoy it. John, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners this morning before we let you go?
Nope. I think the memes on Twitter have covered it all.
John, I got to say, I am enjoying it. Sometimes I get a little jealous about all the attention that you get online. And then other times when I see that, I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that I fly under the radar sometimes on things like this. John Cardillo, you can follow him on Twitter to see all the angry memes that 25-year-olds send him at John Cardillo. John, thanks for your time today. Appreciate you always. Have a great day.
Great to see you, Austin. Thanks, bud.
Great to see you too. That was John Cardillo. What did you think? Send us a text today at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. All right, so if you're a guy, you start dating this beautiful woman, and then you find out after you've been dating her for a little while, maybe you were, I don't know, you had something with her, something physical, but you didn't know that she was a he. What would you call that? None dare call it assault. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America Show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get notes in order, okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America Show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America Show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America Show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America Show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
the woman of my dreams. I've been talking to this girl on the internet for a while. I've actually been trying to save some money to go see this woman.
Did you talk to her online?
I go to the library, believe it or not, to talk to this woman. I met her on MySpace, and she's a very beautiful woman. She's tall, skinny, she's redhead, very beautiful woman.
Why don't we do it this way? Because you've never met her before.
Never met her.
Well, then I'm going to ask you to leave for a few moments, and we'll want to bring her out, let the audience meet her, and then we can both observe you two meeting, which will be a nice moment in your life.
You know where this is
if you would just
all right, thanks.
leave her, we'll have you back in a minute. Thank you.
So, we all remember the 90s, don't we?
Her name is Joby. Let's bring out Joby.
Let's bring out Joby. Listen to the ears. Transphobic.
Hi, Joby.
Hello, Jerry.
You are, you met here, Brad, here on the internet.
Yes, we met on MySpace.
On MySpace?
MySpace. Let's talk about dating yourself.
What attracted you to him?
He was cute. He seemed very nice in the message he sent me.
Yeah. And you think this could be the one?
Yes.
And
but I have a secret to tell him.
You have a secret to tell him?
Yes.
And your secret is?
I'm a man, Jerry.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
He says he wants to meet me, you know, he tried to get a bus ticket or whatever.
Yeah.
I said I'd just call the Jerry Springer show, you know, because then it'll give it more of a spread.
Yes, call the Jerry Springer show.
See what his reaction is going to be. But you really care about him. This isn't just to play a trick on someone. You really want him to be okay with you. All right. Well, let's bring him out now. Okay, how about a nice hand? Let's bring him back now. Here's Brad.
What do you think? How's Brad going to react?
So good to meet you. It's kind of nervous on national TV, I know, but, like, I wanted to ask, like, maybe, like, you know, you could be my girlfriend.
Well, Brad, I have to tell you, I'm a man.
I'll try anything once.
Oh, no. Stop.
No! God, please, no! No!
Good morning. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. It's already a little weird here today, don't you think? Oh, my God.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to excuse me.
Exactly, a single word. So what do you do in this situation here? A single woman has revealed she doesn't tell men she's transgender straight away, as people are, quote, too judgmental. Yeah, people like to make a judgment call about the people that they date. What do you think about that? Duh. She likes to wait until she's sure that she wants to take things further. Adea Danielle, 22 years old, always felt like there was something missing when she was growing up. And at age 16, after she stumbled across a YouTube video, she realized she was transgender. She told her mom she began her journey to become a woman, including embarking on hormone therapy before undergoing gender-affirming surgery in 2021. She's now a Canadian influencer. Yes, you just saw those pictures. Sorry about that. She says she's got over 138,000 followers on Instagram. She says that she often chooses not to disclose the fact that she's transgender to men, which is often met with a backlash. Well, no, Sherlock. I need like a button. No, not that. No, wrong button. No, that is the wrong button. Jeez, where is the freaking censorship button? I thought I had one here. All right, sorry, I had all those buttons this morning. Here's the thing, and this is just one of the realities of life here when it comes to the relationships of men, but men between men versus men and women. Some of men's politeness towards one another, some of it, not all of it, but some of men's politeness towards one another in society is a respect for the fact that the other guy might take your disrespect as an excuse to do violence to you. Does anybody disagree with that? We all know as men that if we are disrespectful to another biological male, you talk spit, you might get hit, right? That's just kind of an unspoken code between men. That's how it is. You don't go mouthing off as a man to another man.
and then not expect it's possible you might not get punched in the face. It could happen. So here's the thing. Underneath this scenario where you are a man and a biological female presents to you, let's say that you engaged in a physical relationship and you were unable, in that intimacy that you occurred, unable to determine that that person was still a biological male. There are plenty of situations, scenarios that could occur where intimacy can occur that don't require you to determine the gender of the other person. They may have had top surgery, for example, and not bottom surgery, and maybe you just didn't go there. I'm sorry to paint this out so explicitly for you this early on a Monday morning. But here's the thing. Under this scenario, does this biological male who presents as a female, do they get treated in that scenario with the brutality of a man? Or do they get the deference that men tend to give towards women? See, the difference in the relationship dynamics between men and women are that with men, there's the unspoken potential of violence between the two. But if it's a woman, then there is a deference that men tend to give towards women, and that they don't do violence towards women because of the physical differences between the two. And there's just sort of a polite society thing. You know, men don't hit women. That's how we've been raised to a large extent. Not to say that doesn't happen. It certainly does. But we tend to look at men who do as, you know, I think rightfully so, putting them on the lower caste of society. Unless, of course, they're a biological male competing in female sports, like people who are competing in the MMA as biological males against biological females, and then for some reason we just treat them as if they actually are females. So the thing is that how do you, in this scenario, how do you treat that person then? Do you treat them like a woman because they're presenting as a woman and they're behaving as a woman? Or do you do to that person what you would do to a man who disrespected you in such a way? I think that's an interesting question, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. Send me a text. 573-319-1586 is the text line. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a text. 573-319-1586. The comments over the live stream are cracking me up. That's why you got to watch us over on YouTube sometimes, because it is hilarious. I'd love to see some comments from our Rumble audience today. We got a good amount of people watching us over there, but they don't have as many comments. So I'd love to see and hear from you guys over there if you're watching us on Rumble. Make sure that you click like on that stream over on Rumble so that we can continue to spread the message over there as well. We'd love to see from over there who are our Rumblers today. So let us know. Coming up next, John Miltimore. He's the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. He's going to talk to us about a stunning admission that the New York Times made in regards to Sweden's COVID policy. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
To the Cantina crew, this is Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter, and I just want to say thank you for watching the Wake Up America show. I've decided that Austin Peterson will be the new CEO of Twitter.com, effective immediately. First thing to do, though, is I've got to go and blast off into space.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
That he's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
If I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors, what would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist. Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. How are you feeling on Monday? Today is April the 17th. Glad to have you here. We appreciate you very much. All right, well, let's continue our post-mortem on government and society's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a massive, globe-changing event, and it deserves the kind of scrutiny that it will receive right now. The New York Times' stunning confession on Sweden's pandemic response, writes John Miltimore over at the Foundation for Economic Education. He says that the Gray Lady reported in 2020 that, quote, Sweden has become the world's cautionary tale for its COVID response. It's singing a very different tune in 2023. Joining me now to discuss is the managing editor of fee.org, John Miltimore. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining us. Remember when people like yourself and myself were getting criticized and chastised for pointing a finger at what Sweden was doing while the United States, states in our country were locking down and treating their citizens like communist China was treating its citizens. But now it seems as if the New York Times is singing a little bit of a different tune. What's this story?
Yeah, it got some coverage. I think a lot of people who wrote about what the New York Times said missed some pretty important things. The one thing is, David Wallace Wells, who wrote the article, I think it's a great article. I'd encourage people to read it. And basically his conclusion is that Sweden had a very average pandemic. Okay. Now you can kind of quibble with the numbers that Wallace Wells uses. There's a lot of data out there. There's some going around. In fact, that you'll see, Sweden is using like their own health department, and Anders Tegnell, who was the architect of their policies, kind of been on a media tour. And according to their data, Sweden has the lowest excess mortality in Europe. Wallace Wells said some of that's not adjusted for age and so forth. But no matter how you slice it, Sweden did just fine, and they didn't lock down. And if you go back and you look, this wasn't what people predicted, right? Like that Sweden was going to have close to 100,000 deaths in 6 months if they didn't do this. That didn't happen. The modelers were all wrong. If you look, media was all wrong. They were saying all these headlines. They basically said Sweden was marching people to their deaths, right? Because this idea that Sweden didn't do anything is wrong too, though. Sweden did have certain limits on capacity in restaurants. They just didn't shut down society. They said, we're not going to close all the schools. We're not going to close all the restaurants. And this is the most important thing from the New York Times. They quote an infectious disease expert in that story who says that is the biggest lesson, that you don't have to use all these coercive policies. That Sweden shows you can kind of do this without, throwing people into jail, for not wearing a mask, or closing down the restaurant owner and throwing him in jail, because he's trying to make a living. All those policies, those heavily coercive policies, it's not just that they don't work; they're so harmful. And I think a lot of people forget that, including, let's go back, it was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was having a blast, like ripping Sweden on Twitter, ripping Sweden to the press. I'd like someone in the media to go ask Trump about that, because he clearly wants to be president again. He was part of the problem. He got these things wrong. There's a thing when I see people in DC where they agree, like when Republicans and Democrats agree on something, I universally think that's a bad idea. And when I see Trump and the media agree on something, I think that's a sign that they're wrong. And I think the further we get from the pandemic, it's clearer and clearer that Sweden got this mostly right.
Okay, so I'm looking at your article here at fee.org. You posted a tweet here from a Mark Changizi. He says the lowest excess deaths in Europe over 2020 to 2022 goes to Sweden, the one country that did not panic and toss out all wisdom. What is this excess mortality? What does that mean?
Basically, what they're looking at there, they're not looking at just people who died from COVID and people, in those numbers. They're looking at what you would expect the total number of deaths to be. And all nations had excess mortality there for a few years. But they're saying this is the benchmark where we'd expect it to be. This is how much higher than that we were. And most nations were much, much higher. Sweden's, as you say, I think it was like 3%, 3.5%, something in there. A lot of these other nations are, they're 10% over what you'd expect. And if you look at like countries that locked down the hardest in Europe, you can go to the UK, France, these other countries. Even the New York Times makes it clear, like the World Health Organization data shows their per capita deaths are way, way higher than Sweden's. Some of the countries that we heard this for years, like, oh, well, look at Finland, look at Norway, like they're even lower than Sweden. And nobody was saying, or nobody would have predicted that Sweden had to be the number one ranked in Europe. Okay. Even though they might be, depending on how you look at the data, nobody said they had to be number one. They just had to not, you wouldn't think somebody who is going to do this policy different. They don't have to have the best policy. They just have to not be getting people killed. But the thing with Sweden and Norway, they both adopted Sweden's policy. This is what, in this, Wallace Wells talks about this a little bit in the article. I've written about this, and, I was writing about this a year or two ago. Sweden, both Finland, Norway, they adopted Swedish-like policies. In fact, they were less stringent than Sweden for a good chunk of 2020. And I think what, you look in measuring this data is hard, but Oxford University has a really good, a data stringency, index that you can look at it. Is it hard? Yeah, but it's pretty good data. And when you look, Sweden, even though they never officially locked down, they were actually more stringent for a good chunk of that, like as I said, than Finland and Norway. So it wasn't, when you compare those countries, say, well, they could have been like this, like Norway and Finland. Well, no, Norway and Finland started to adopt the Swedish approach because they saw it was working.
You're just tuning into the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Welcome to the show. I'm speaking to John Miltimore. He is the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. We're talking about how the New York Times did a bit of an about face on its coverage of how Sweden handled the pandemic. In the early days of the pandemic, John actually wrote an article over at fee.org about why their approach deserved greater scrutiny. Of course, a lot of people dismiss that. He said, could Sweden's laissez-faire approach to the coronavirus actually work? And while, of course, the New York Times would never admit that laissez-faire in anything could ever work, it does seem as if many of them are starting to change their tune, at least in some of their rhetoric. John, I'd like to switch tack and talk about something a little bit different there here, if you don't mind, regarding the culture
No, go
wars.
for it.
Are you a beer drinking man?
I like beer.
You like beer, like Guy Kavanaugh likes beer. What kind of beer are you drinking these days?
It's funny. I drink all kinds. There's a brewery here I live in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, called Surly. I got some of that in my fridge. I have Corona and Heineken and Stella. I do drink light beer too, but if I'm going to drink a light beer, it's Miller Lite.
So let me ask you something. If there was a beer brand that came out and it was, let's just say it was being marketed as beer for homosexuals, the gayest beer on earth imaginable, a biggest rainbow can, transgender flag on the side. Would you go out and buy that beer and drink it if it, let's say you're drinking that beer and it had the rainbow flag on it? Would you go out and buy that beer?
I would not. And it's not because any sort of like hostility to gay people. But no, like I'm somebody, I don't like this, like I don't like the corporations that are sticking their nose, like it's funny. We talk about this culture war, and I sounded off on Twitter a little bit about this. I don't know if you saw it, but like they were blaming people like me who said, basically are saying, I'm not going to buy the beer, if you're going to like, throw rainbow flags or preach politics, but they're blaming us for the culture war. Like us choosing to not buy the beer, we're the problem in the culture war. And I think that's backwards. Like the people that are stoking the culture war are the ones that are trying to say society has to preach these kind of the new ideologies at us, and this inclusivity and diversity in all things. And I know we're talking about Bud Light here. I think what people overlook in this story is why Bud Light was doing that too. I know you have the marketing manager, and like she was, clearly had drank the Kool-Aid on some of this stuff. But if you look at the stakeholder capitalism model, all of these companies, these corporations are trying to basically improve their social credit scores, right? That they're being graded on their inclusivity with the CIE scores, and there's so many acronyms for it, like with consumer social responsibility and all these things. They're doing this for a reason. I don't think people realize how harmful, like capitalism doesn't need to be improved by making it, responsive to stakeholders and to politics and these things. Let capitalism be capitalism. And Bud Light, went a different route, and their bottom line, how much they pay a price for this, I don't know. I'm curious. How much of a price do you think they'll pay?
I think that they'll take a dip this summer, going into this summer. But I think when barbecue season goes around, people tend it's the United States of amnesia. I think people will forget after several months, and then the market capitalization will return. That's just me. I wasn't a Bud Light drinker before pretty much ever. I mean, I would take it if somebody handed it to me, but I pretty much always thought drinking Bud Light was gay. Just kidding. Yeah. But I mean, the thing is,
it is bad beer.
It reminds me a bit of, I think it was a stand-up sketch that Doug Stanhope did a number of years ago, when he was talking about rollerblades and how everybody loved rollerblades and everybody was using rollerblades until one guy was like, that's gay. And then all of a sudden using rollerblades was gay. It kind of seems like it's the same approach to Bud Light. It's like, it's a bit toxic because now everybody is going to associate drinking Bud Light with being gay.
Yeah, the backlash was something to watch. Like I just know people who suddenly, people that are not political people were like, "Oh, I'm not buying Bud Light anymore." I'm like, "Oh, people that would have been drinking Bud Light for 25 years, they said, "I'm not going to buy that anymore." Yeah, like whether or not they follow through on that, we'll see. But no, I really wish corporations need to get back to doing what they do. They serve their customers, they serve their shareholders, and if they focus on those things, they do them well, they're going to do just fine. We don't need corporations getting involved in all these sort of lightning, polarizing topics that divide people. I think that's how we end up with everything being politicized today. This is not healthy. When everything's politicized, it's not good.
But it's like we're in a situation, John, where, ESGs are a thing, right? Environmental social governance, right? So leftist values are being pushed through corporations to try and market ideas to the general public and to put pressure on corporations to support leftist ideas. And so if you and I, we may not be social conservatives in the sense you might be, I'm not, but the what unites people like yourself and myself is that we don't want the government to try and force somebody's narrow worldview on the rest of us. But in regards to the simple tactics, the political tactics here, John, I read Matt Walsh talking about how it was important for us to punish Bud Light in order for us to kind of get a scalp, if you will. And in that way, I think, it sort of is the same thing. It's kind of like when David and Goliath went to war, when David went against the Philistines. David took down, slayed the giant, but it wasn't just that he didn't kill him with the stone. He actually had to go over to cross the river, grab Goliath's own sword, and cut off the head of the beast, of the giant, in front of the armies of the Philistines in order for them to see what had happened and to flee. So there's value in sort of making an example out of Bud Light in a way. I mean, this is kind of a David and Goliath story. In terms of tactics politically, this might be what we, even as libertarians, have to adopt in order to fight back against things like ESG. Would you agree?
You talk about making an example. You're right that sort of, and I never thought about the David and Goliath fight in that way. But you're right that tactically, why do you think the leakers suddenly, like, they drag out somebody who leaks documents? Go back before this guy that did it recently. Every once in a while, the Obama administration was great at this. Like, they're just saying, "Oh, we have some leaks. We're going to just go find some people, make examples," and suddenly leaks stop. Right? Nixon, you can see the same thing working there. Like, "Oh, we gotta make some examples." So yeah, like they're tactically, that's absolutely right. I wouldn't say that's worth pursuing if that is a tactic. Now, what is it that we're going to use it against? I do think that stakeholder capitalism like this is a real threat, and we've been kind of writing about that for a long time. We didn't know why in some ways. Like, we're just trying to say, like, look, capitalism doesn't need to be improved upon. But trying to explain why this was, a potentially bad thing was hard. And I've had conversations with people, with the CEOs who are really, really excited about stakeholder capitalism. And like they're like, why don't you like it? We've talked about it a little bit. And I don't think it's, look, when this is being done voluntarily, I think you can actually make a case like, you know what, there are some ways stakeholder capitalism can be okay. And this guy, I spoke to a while back, mentioned one, like these social media companies, like, if they feel like they have a responsibility, like, look, there is a lot of misinformation out there. Maybe they can have some initiatives instead of government trying to police misinformation. Some of these, Facebook and Twitter could voluntarily say, we're going to do some research and to try to fight, if they choose to do that, there's, no, I wouldn't be doing that if I was running Facebook or Twitter, because I would say that's not my responsibility. But I do think some of these things can be benign, but we're seeing the movement isn't benign. That the movement is trying to really force an ideology on people. And we're seeing people don't like it, like we want to, we're talking about shelf products. You shouldn't have to go and worry about like a shelf product for years. Like, no, all you do is you don't alienate your consumer, right? That's your job. You don't alienate them. Well, now we're seeing they are doing that. They're kind of changing capitalism before our eyes. And if people choose to make an example out of Bud Light, I certainly have no problem with that. It's something we as consumers, I'd much rather go back to when we didn't have to worry about this, when you didn't have to worry about the politics of Miller Lite or Bud Light, when they were just kind of trying to be funny and please everyone. But companies that do kind of do this, I expect they will pay some kind of price. How severe Bud Lights will be, I don't know. I think some of that's been exaggerated so far. I think you're right. The United States of amnesia. I think in 3 months or 6 months, most people will have forgotten about this, but I could be wrong.
John, I've been going a little bit long on this segment because it's been a good conversation, but I have another topic that I'd like to discuss with you. Do you happen to have a few more minutes you can stick around, or do you
Let's do it.
Okay,
no, let's
good.
do it.
I'd like to talk to you about a comment that I made on Twitter about a week ago that got a bit of a pushback from mostly from right-wing. I guess you could call them the anti-capitalist right, if you will, or the populist right. People who don't agree with positions like you and I take in terms of international free trade and other ones, right? That's something that might get us, tagged with the tag of globalist, if you will. But, having been in business and, running several businesses in my lifetime, hiring and firing of employees and having to deal with payroll taxes and unemployment taxes and FICA and everything that you have to deal with as an employer, it has been difficult to be able to sit back and sort of take the abuse, especially from the right, in regards to the question of one, international free trade, and two, the international flow of capital, right? So there's just money flowing across borders, for example. And so I'm faced with this scenario now where we have this irregularity in the job market. The American job market is still an absolute nightmare, right? Tens of thousands of layoffs in Silicon Valley, right? People who, are complaining that they can't even get, simple, jobs working $15 an hour. You get people, the great resignation. A lot of people just don't want to work, right? That they don't want to go back in the workplace. I mean, I am having trouble hiring people. So what I'm trying to do at this moment with my business, and I'll just tell you, is that I want to hire consultants, because in order for me to be able to get the kind of skilled labor that I need, it's almost impossible to find a single employee without having the resources of a major corporation to do certain digital tasks that I need done that are extremely complicated and that require an understanding of my business model, who my client base is, my customers, and all of that. Whenever I go to an American consultancy, John, they don't, for 99 times out of 100, the people that I speak to, the American consultants, their prices are obnoxiously high, and they very rarely do any research on my business. They never talk about return on investment. All they do is throw me out a quote for thousands and thousands of dollars, even though I've given them the best analysis that I can on my business, of how much money that I make, how much I can spend on advertising and marketing, what I'm doing right now. Like, they almost completely ignore it and just give me a quote for something that is obviously way bigger than what my budget is or what I can afford, with no promise or guarantee of a return on investment. Alternatively, John, I go to Fiverr.com, I find a guy in Pakistan who listens to me, learns who my customer base is, does the project, the scope of work to my complete satisfaction, and rather than $8,000 a month, charges me a flat fee of $200. That's why is there a problem that we have? Is there an entitlement problem that we have in the American workforce now? Are these people, and mostly these highly paid consultants, are they operating in this concept of pre-pandemic, capabilities? Because it just seems to me as if the American, not only the worker, but the American consultancy is operating in some model in the past. It just seems like everything is out of whack. If I could use a big word, disequilibrium is what it feels like to me. Either the American worker's got to take a pay cut, or we've got to have more international free trade. What do you think?
Well, I obviously am a huge proponent of free trade, and your example that you cite here is a great, illustration of why it's so important. You shouldn't have to hire consultants in America, and if you were, you couldn't do what you wanted. As you're explaining right now, if you really were forced to hire, consultants that are here, you wouldn't hire them, and you need help. And who does that help in such a scenario? I think the benefits of free trade, they've always suffered a little bit because they're largely invisible, right? Like, we don't see all the benefits of free trade, and we get angry at China, and we see these statistics thrown out there about the trade deficit and all these things, and we don't see all these benefits. They're largely invisible to us. You do over time, right? Like, and like they're visible in our prices and things. As far as why there's this disequilibrium, I don't know, but I think you're onto something. It's a very weird labor market. Because you do have unemployment very low, but you have still people resigning like crazy. You have people leaving the workforce like crazy. You have layoffs in places that aren't originally associated with, unemployment, especially when we're not technically in a recession. You look at what's going on in Silicon Valley. So it is very strange. And I think we're still going to learn, and we'll probably never get the full picture, right? Some of these things going on. I think it is largely due to this, all the pandemic stuff. You can't disrupt this to this degree and expect it to snap back, especially when, I hate to sound like a broken record, especially when you have so many, so much government involved in these things, right? Like when you look at the labor market, let's be honest, if you still have people that we have a very lucrative welfare system in different ways, right? Where you talk to people who are like, I want to go back to work, but I work more, and suddenly I'm not getting the food stamps I've been collecting. They don't say food stamps. I forget the, EBT card. Yeah. But they start taking hits in other ways. When you have incentives baked into the system that discourage work, like that's a problem. And here's the difference. I've long thought about this. The difference between capitalists and Marxists is I look at that and I see that's a problem because I look at work as good. Like work improves me. Work makes me better. Not just because of the money I make. We're called to work. We're supposed to work. And sometimes it's hard. There's days you don't want to go. You have conflict. Fighting through conflict is good. It elevates you. Marxists view work as exploitation. And when they hear things like labor distance benefits, it's like, well, no, we just got to make wages higher then. Like they go off on that thing. But I think you can learn a lot about people. Ask how they feel about work, right? Like we've all done jobs that sucked. We've done jobs that were hard. Do you look back and say like, I look back at those jobs and think like, gosh, they've improved me and they taught me, well, I don't want to be doing that when I'm 50. I'm going to do some things now so I don't have to do that. But you can learn a lot by just asking people about, their perception of work. And that's a kind of a long answer to your question. I hope you get your situation sorted out, by the way. No, it's good. Well. You're savvy. I'm impressed that you're taking the time and putting the legwork in to go find consultants in Pakistan who can actually help your business.
Yeah, I have no choice. I mean, it's sink or swim. I mean, I'm in one of the most competitive industries, if not the most competitive industry in the entire world. I'm trying to build a media company from the bottom up, right? With a podcast. Anybody can have a podcast. Anybody in the world can compete against me. I'm also doing e-commerce and merchandise, competitive as it gets. And so when I go and I talk to American consultants, they just throw out these massive numbers of monthly retainers after I'm like, okay, so here's the budget I'm working with, right? And I'm like, if it doesn't work for you, then maybe it doesn't make sense for us to continue this conversation. We go through all of these intense discussions. At the end of the day, they throw these briefs at me that just have no basis in reality. And no, I mean, I have not ever heard from an American consultant, here's what we might be able to expect in terms of an ROI, or here's an example of how much we cost and how much we made for a client, based on such and such what we've done. Like we did this, we made this amount of money. I mean, I have never heard that from an American consultant. Now, I don't hear it a whole lot from consultants overseas, but I also don't get ridiculous quotes from them on what they charge to be able to set up email automations for my business. So it's just like the expectations that the American worker has, I think are again, they're out of whack with what the actual reality is in the labor market. Now, in terms of work from home, right? That's, to me, I'm all about work from home. I think remote work is good, cuts down, if you're a climate change person, I mean, you're cutting down on emissions. But I think it gives people a better work-life balance, which they're demanding now. And I completely understand and I respect and I tolerate. I even encourage that. But John, in regards to what the American worker wants to get paid, $15 an hour to sling burgers, $8,000 a month to write emails and things like that, it just seems like people's expectations now is not at par with what the international community can actually provide in terms of value. I'll give you the last word on that.
No, I think you're right. And I think that these are things when people just, throw out these numbers, $15 minimum wage, like that's, we know that they didn't put any sort of, real analysis into that. It was just a number that sounded good. That's not how wages work. And I think just listening to your story, I think you realize there are a lot of problems in the U.S. Economy right now that we don't really see. We're still trying to figure out, but you're not the only business that's struggling to do this, and hopefully that I am impressed that you're asking your consultants the right questions about return on investment and so forth. I remember, at different companies when we'd hire consultants, And I'll be honest, like I know some consultants are really good and can improve your. I just haven't seen any personally, because I think we tended to hire the consultants that you're describing. They were paid a lot of money and they talk about your brand and they give you advice. And I'm like, I saw no tangible benefits from all this money. But I think it starts on top. You know what you're looking for and you're asking the right questions, and so hopefully your experience with consultants is going to turn out better than the ones I've had in the past.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, I'll tell you just a little bit of background, like, insider baseball stuff. There's this new technology. I guess it's, a couple years old, which in digital world is ancient, but new to me. This new technology I've discovered, which is basically automation. So you basically create bots that answer people's questions and convert your social media lists into email addresses, which is kind of like the base thing that you have to do, is to turn people who follow you on social media into email addresses. And so I've created, with the help of someone from Pakistan, a chat bot that's a libertarian chat bot that sends people funny libertarian jokes and puns or riddles and ask them questions. And when they DM me on Instagram the word rebel, they get back a libertarian joke or a pun. And then if they want, they can go further, where it's like they say, okay, well, if they answer the question or if they respond to the joke, then it gives them a free coupon from my website, apforlibertyshop.com. And then if they choose to get the coupon, they have to give me their email address in exchange for it. And I mean, it's just hugely successful. And I'm just like, wow, here's something that's actually providing me a return on investment, a tangible return on investment. And it's been exciting to see. And now I'm actually saying to myself, I've got all of these problems with my business. And I don't have the time or the expertise to sit down and go through all of the arcane rules of Meta, the arcane rules of Twitter, the arcane rules of Facebook, and all, or whatever, and figure this stuff out. I can just pay somebody $200 a pop in Pakistan to do all this stuff for me, and basically streamline my business and put me in a competitive advantage to most of my peers. It's an exciting time because, where markets are out of whack, people like myself are going out there and finding out all of the opportunities that exist and taking advantage of them. But anyways, I'm not trying to take up all of your time here today, John.
No, I just like hearing like the entrepreneurship is great. And this is what makes entrepreneurship great. You're not somebody who's getting paid by a boss or a CEO to go do this. You're working to make it work because you're an entrepreneur, and that's what's going to make you successful. So, well, that's awesome. Thanks a lot for the invitation today.
Yeah, thanks for coming on today, John Miltimore, the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. You can read his website, fee.org. I read it every single day, as you know, because I book John all the time because he writes good stuff over there. And you can follow him on Twitter at Miltimore79. Have a good one, John. Appreciate you, sir.
Hey, you too, AP. Take care, man.
Take care. All right, it's finally time for the title piece. Why is it that young boys like Andrew Tate so much? We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Donald Trump and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Step right up, ladies and gents, to learn about the coolest president yet. He's not just any old prez, he's Calvin Coolidge, and boy oh boy is he different from the rest. He was quiet as a mouse, but don't you underestimate his power. He knew how to handle money, and he didn't waste an hour. He cut taxes, lowered debt, and balanced the budget with ease. No wonder the Roaring Twenties brought such prosperity and peace. But don't take my word for it. Grab a copy of Calvin the Coolest President and see for yourself. It's a children's book that'll make you smile and help your little ones learn about wealth. You can find it on Amazon Kindle or get your hands on a paperback at apforlibertyshop.com. So come on down and get yourself a copy of the book that's making waves all around town. You won't regret it, so get ready to be floored, because Calvin Coolidge, well, folks, he really scored.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every $1 we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
any real-world experience.
It's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on wakeupAmericaShow.com. I've got a great discussion coming up for you here in just a couple of minutes. Why do boys love Andrew Tate? I've got a great article from New York Magazine, a leftist magazine, that sort of digs into the phenomenon of why so many young men around the world are so fascinated with this Andrew Tate character. We'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, I actually thought I should play for you a really quick little clip from Bill Maher over the weekend where he talks about sex scandals and presidents. Let's take a listen.
Worth asking the Democrats, having gone through this yourselves, what don't you get about sex scandals don't work on presidents? Because no matter what the underlying legal reasons are that underpin a sex scandal, to the average person, it's just always going to be about sex. Nothing can compete. Law is boring. It's the constitutional equivalent of golf. I remember what people were talking about during the Clinton scandal, and it wasn't the finer points of perjury law. It was about how one of his blowies happened during a phone call with congressional leaders, and how he came in the sink, and how they did it on Easter, and that thing he did with the cigar. Spoiler alert, if you're too young to know, don't ask. Same thing with Trump today. Joe Sixpack is not going to take the time to wrap his head around how the statute of limitations applies to a misdemeanor of falsifying business records if it involves a violation of state election law, and a second crime involving a federal campaign conditional on the residential status of the defendant.
Yeah, that was actually the description of the case against Donald Trump and what he was arrested for. Verbatim. did you find your eyes glazing over when you heard that and wondering what the hell you're talking about? That was the actual case. But what is everybody talking about? Sex with Stormy Daniels. Let's hear that one more time.
Falsifying business records.
Here we go.
Six-pack is not going to take the time to wrap his head around how the statute of limitations applies to a misdemeanor of falsifying business records if it involves a violation of state election law and a second crime involving a federal campaign conditional on the residential status of the defendant.
That's the case against Trump.
My head hurts just saying it. There's a reason every news outlet in the country recently ran the headline, "How strong is the case against Trump?" It's their way of saying, don't get your hopes up.
Yeah.
Yes, Trump fucked Stormy Daniels at a charity golf event while his wife was home with their newborn. The kind of thing we all assumed Trump was doing.
That's funny because that was the scandal that actually did take down the former governor here of the state of Missouri, Eric Greitens, who, when he was governor, was involved in a scandal where I believe one of his children was being born in the hospital. His wife was in the hospital having a child, and he was with his mistress at the time. So you can't say entirely that sex scandals can't work to take him down, but it just doesn't seem to work against presidents. Let's continue. You can't take down a governor.
What's your next bombshell? That his hair is a comb-over? The shocking part wasn't the sex, it was that he was involved in a legitimate charity.
Is that really that funny? I mean, some guys like
and
screaming
to at least
laughing.
half the country, it looks like you tried to get him on Russia, and you tried to get him on Ukraine, and you tried to get him on classified documents, and you didn't. So now you went for the old reliable. Congratulations. It seems.
Congratulations, you are going to fail. What do you think about that one? Send us a text at 573-319-1586. All right, so the big story today, an article that I read in New York Magazine, why Andrew Tate's has essentially become so popular in young male circles. The article is called Tate Pilled. What a generation of boys have found in Andrew Tate's extreme male gospel. And of course, the article is written by a woman, which is, no offense, ladies, but it's hard to understand sometimes the way that men think, I would say, if you're not one of us. But Andrew Tate basically took over the internet in the last couple of years. And the boys who follow him love him because in his videos, he's always chomping a cigar. He's got bands of cash. He's on a private jet. He's got diamond watches, Bugattis, Lamborghinis, machetes, and he's just being very masculine. And of course, that in itself, just the trappings of masculinity, not the internal things that make us men, but the external trappings of masculinity, or what you might say the signaling that you're a masculine male, are always going to be attractive to young men, not necessarily older men, depending on, I guess, how masculine those men are or how much they sort of have been, what do you call it? I guess just men who have had their balls cut off are going to be attracted to men in that way. You'll see videos of Andrew Tate making fun of his brother for eating sushi and, saying that soy boys eat sushi, whereas eating fried chicken makes men strong. But Andrew Tate took over the world. Lots of 17-year-old boys love his videos. He says things like slap, slap, grab, choke, shut up, bitch, sex. Sorry, this is going to get a little bit PG-13 for those who are listening to us right now, getting their kids ready for school or what have you. FYI, I might want to turn this down or put on headphones. But the reason why I think that Andrew Tate really holds people's attention more than just people who are interested in the juvenile antics of Tate and his brother is the truths that Andrew Tate says that are truths regardless of who says them, whether or not Jordan Peterson says it, Andrew Tate says it, or Austin Peterson says it. Things that he says, like having mental toughness and physical discipline as a way to conquer a melees that young men might be feeling, that's going to attract men who are interested in things more than just Bugattis and diamond watches and, dating attractive women and all of that. That's going to attract men who are going to be searching for answers to the problems that they're facing in their lives. And Andrew Tate is going to be able to step in the gap for them. Most of them because they didn't have a good father figure in their life. And so Andrew Tate takes the place of that, right? Maybe they have domineering liberal mothers and their household is dominated by feminine energy. And so young boys who are not homosexuals, who are resistant to their mother's liberal or even their father's, to you typically effete or ineffectual men, who are dominated by liberal women in their households, those young boys who are not homosexuals are going to be looking for answers, and they're going to be looking for a father figure in their life if their father figure is essentially absent, or like I said, effeminate, effeminate, or ineffectual. And these young people are going to be finding Andrew Tate as well. Now, a lot of young men that I have heard from that, have heard me, for example, express criticisms of Andrew Tate and some of the things that he says or does, say things like, well, Andrew Tate helped me get my life in order. Andrew Tate inspired me to go on to do better things. I'll say this. This is one of the realizations that I had in my life about 10 or 12 years ago. I used to, in the early days of my career, I used to credit my successes, my early successes, to Ron Paul. And that's because I was, obviously a super fan of his, campaigned for him twice to help him win the presidency, voted for him twice, and was inspired by him to go out and do incredible things in my career. But the fact is that it wasn't Ron Paul that that got me to get up out of my dingy, cockroach-ridden, mouse-laden apartment in New York City, in Astoria, Queens, Long Island City, actually, and get out into the streets and start doing something and taking control of my life. Those were my decisions. And just because I drew inspiration from Ron Paul doesn't mean that he was the one who was responsible for it. And I would invite you to consider the fact that successes that you have and failures are all of your own doing. All of your successes and all of your failures can be laid at your own feet. And too much of our modern American culture, and maybe even global culture, is to place the blame or responsibility for the problems that we have in our lives on other people. Even libertarians often will say, well, the reason why I can't succeed is because the government is devaluing my dollar, or the reason why I can't do this is because the local government is doing this. And sometimes that is the case. But the smart capitalists are the ones who go out there and break the rules and do what is correct anyway, or sometimes they even maybe work underneath the table. I'm not encouraging you to not pay taxes, but I find there to be nothing morally wrong with it. My personal worldview is that if you don't pay taxes, then that is not an immoral or criminal act in my view. So it's like that quote that Donald Trump once said, I don't pay my tax, you don't pay your taxes. Well, that makes me smart, right? And I'm taking advantage of the tax laws as they are to be able to pay as little taxes as possible. And that's actually legal. But if you're also not paying taxes because you're doing work underneath the table, I don't see anything wrong with that. That's my own personal view. I realize that makes me a radical. I realize that makes me an extremist, I know, as Elizabeth Fanning Press would like us to say. But I just happen to believe that that the government is immoral, unlawful, and illegal, and that taxes are theft. And so therefore, if you're breaking the law and avoiding taxes, I'm not encouraging you to do that because I'm pretty sure that it's illegal for me to do that, and I'm live right now on camera. But I will just say that I don't find that to be immoral. Unlawful it is, but immoral, no. Why is Andrew Tate such a male role model? Shifting gender norms, complicated marriages that men are involved in these days, with women who say that they want to be polyamorous. You pretty much never see a relationship where it's the men going out there and saying, we want to have a polyamorous relationship. We want to be poly. Typically, men who want to be polyamorous, they just go out and cheat. They don't want to create a relationship where they have an open relationship and their wife can go out and do as they please. But typically, I also think that those kinds of relationships are much more beneficial to men than they are to women. I'm not going to get into that maybe for another day. But the absence of male role models is absolutely the reason why Andrew Tate is so popular today. I mean, who are good, positive male role models that people can look up to? They don't have good fathers, right? They don't have good men to be able to look up to. Thankfully, I do, and thankfully I did. And my brother and I and sister were very lucky to be able to have a good, strong male role model. Of course, our mother passed away when we were young, and I won't say that she was overbearing or dominant. She had a very strong personality, but she was still very feminine as well. I would say that that's probably the perfect combination in terms of mom. You want a mom who's tough and can look out for her son's interests, but you also don't want a mother who domineers you and is, feminizes her boys as well. Raise young men to be young men. We had a good father for that purpose. But I think that that is the problem with a lot of men of my generation and younger. Do not have that kind of a strong role model. And these are men who are henpecked, who are put into their place. These are men who are effeminate, effete, they are liberalized, and they are domineered and dominated by their wives. So it's an unfortunate situation that we're in where Andrew Tate steps in to fill the gap, because a lot of the things that Andrew Tate says and does, I think, are not the kind of thing that make you into what I would prefer to see men become, and that is gentlemen. Like, if you just want to become a raw warrior, right? If you want, dirt under your nails and, dirt in your beard, and, that's fine. And certainly there's a place for people like that in our society. But I actually think that it's better that we don't descend back into savagery. I do actually think that there's a benefit in having men who have taste and class and sophistication and can operate in higher circles. And if it makes me an elitist, then whatever. I really don't give a shit what you think. But I like the fact that there was, at a time, maybe the Victorian era, and a little bit beyond, when there was an actual push to have men be strong, be strong like savages, compete in sports, to lift weights, and to have those sort of masculine energy that comes from our savagery, but also to have a refined and sophisticated approach to how we behave in polite society. And that is, in my mind, proper civilization. What do you think about that one? Probably a take that not a lot of people would agree with necessarily. I know people prefer to have one side or another. You have to be this, or you have to be that. You got to be a complete and total savage barbarian and eat raw bull testicles and swell up to 350 pounds with giant muscles, or you're not a man, right? And then the other side of things is the hyper liberal, hyper feminized, effete, ineffectual men, right? But isn't there something better? Isn't there something perhaps in the middle, right? Where you can be a tough, savage male, have all of those trappings of masculinity, but still somehow be able to be sophisticated, be classy, respectful? I don't know if I've achieved it either. When we get back, the Wilhelm scream. Have you ever heard this classic scream? It's a sound effect. We finally found the origin of it. I'll play it for you when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com. Before we do, I want to talk to you about my friends over at Lear Capital. Gold and silver, silver and gold, silver and gold. I'm excited to bring to you the best in terms of precious metals, so much so that they are the precious metals leader here in the United States. Lear Capital has great deals on gold and silver investments that you can hold in your hands. Clinkety clink, chinkety chink. If you'd like to get the shekels, you can visit my friends over at learaustin.com. But if you're saying to yourself, I'm not necessarily interested in having clinkety clink, chinkety chink, or carrying around shekels, or even putting them away. I know a lot of people do like to store them on their personal properties and say, hey, I've got gold in my safe. Great, you can do that at Lear Capital. Or you can do what I think is probably the smartest bit of investment advice, and that is to put some of your gold, of your IRA or your 401k, into gold and silver investments. Yeah, you can invest in the actual hard metal itself. And if you want to take possession of it at any time, you can certainly do that. Find out more at Lear Capital at learaustin.com. Get more information for free. You can give them a call today at 1-800-885-21. We forget that the cowboys in the Wild West read, understood, and memorized Shakespeare. Amen, brother. That's what I'd like to see again. It's cowboys who can quote Shakespeare. Get thee to a nunnery. We'll be back with more on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here, and we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, you know, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order.